Kuf Hey and Aleph, 105A. And at okay, a little less than halfway down the page. It's at the second boy rova. So if you look at the colon in the beginning, there was one question. We're at the second question. A little less than halfway down the page. Boy rova had the following question: Gozal shtei agudais v'pruta. He stole two bundles that were worth one pruta, 1/4. He returned one of them. Mahu, what's the story? Do we say that now that he's still less than a quarter because one bundle remains with him? Therefore, like exelo, there's no stolen item. Or do we say that ultimately speaking, he hasn't returned the stolen item because he remains with one of the two bundles which were stolen? Hadar Pashta. So Rav explained it. Gzela ein kan, hashava ein kan. There's no stolen item and there's no returned item. So the Gemara says, Gzela ein kan, if there's no gzela, hashava yeshkan, how if there's no stolen item, how is it even possible to return it? Meaning if there's no stolen item because it's less than a pruta, less than a quarter, then how is it possible to return it? So the Gemara says, Hachikar, this is what he meant to say. Av b'shek gzela ein kan, mitzvah hashava ein kan. Even that because there is no stolen item, therefore you cannot fulfill it's not possible to return it. Why is there no stolen item? Because the stolen item is less than a pruta. So don't give it significance. Rava says, like I said, Rava was busy very finely addressing a number of these points throughout Talmud, where there was a minimum quantity necessary, and he did half the minimum quantity. Similarly, so you have a Nazir, Shegilach v'shayar shtei saros. So Nazir has to shave all of his hair. All of his hair primarily means if I remember correctly, it's Gemara in Saita. It means areas where the hair grows visibly. So stand at a distance is basically three areas. It's a pubic growth, and it's under armpit growth, and here on the head. I believe that includes the eyebrows as well, because the eyebrows are visible from a distance. Okay, and as opposed to, let's say, chest hair or hair on the hands, which he's not obligated to shave, because that's obviously some people it is significant, but generally speaking, it's not noticeable that that's a place where hair grows from a distance. Okay, so Nazir Shegilach v'shayar shtei saros. He has to shave off all his hairs. The definition of that is that there aren't two hairs remaining, but this guy left over two hairs. If he leaves over two hairs, he does not fulfill the obligation. So lo yosef v'lo klum. He hasn't accomplished the commandment. Boy Rava. So Rava had the question. Gilach achas v'noshra achas. Let's say he cut off one hair and the last hair fell off on its own. Ma, what's the story? So, what does it sound like? So, Abrele Rabachim Adiftu Ravino, this is what it sounds like. Nozer Shigilach Achas coming by. What happens if a guy was shaving his hair very slowly, such that he got to the last two hairs and he shaved off one and the last one fell off? Why is that any different than this scenario? It's exactly the same thing. And presumably in that scenario, because he shaved off the second to last hair, he has fulfilled his obligation. And the last hair fell off, fine. So Amrulay, no. He said he reframes the question. The opposite happened. He shaved off all his hairs except for two. One of them fell off, and the other one was shaved off. Do we say hashtamiya like a shear? Do we say that right now, once the second to last hair fell out, there's no more minimum quantity, so he can't shave off all his hairs anymore because he only has one hair left, which is not a minimum quantity. Or do we say halav gilachu. This does not constitute shaving. Why not? The mikara hashayar shtei saras. Initially, the mikara hashayar shtei saras. Initially, he's left over 2 hairs. V'hashal kigilach. 1 second. Lehav base saras. Now that he's shaving, he's cutting his hairs. There is no 2 hairs left. 1 second. They changed gear. Okay, this makes much more sense. Okay, okay. Instead of I'll reread this. This is a scenario. One fell out first, and then he cut the other one. Not shear. There is no hair left. So he does accomplish the commandment because at the end of the day, he doesn't have any hair left. It's true he didn't shave the second to last hair, but ultimately speaking, he does not have any hair left. Or we say halav giluach, it does not constitute cutting or shaving. The mikara hashayar shtei saras, the hashkigilach lehav bei saras. Initially, he left over 2 hairs. Hashkigilach lehav bei saras, and now that he shaved, he does not have two hairs left. He's not shaving 2 hairs, so he doesn't have a minimum quantity. In other words, do we look at overall he has no hair left, so he does fulfill the obligation, or no, he has to cut 2 and he didn't cut 2?
We're splitting hairs here.
Yes, absolutely. 1 second. Okay, so Amar Lei, 1 second. Hadar Pashta, he later answered, Sarah Ein Kan, there's no hair. Giluach Ein Kan, so there's no cutting. So the Gemara says, Isara Ein Kan, Giluach Yesh Kan. Like if there's no hair, obviously there's no cutting. Since there is no hair, it is not possible to fulfill the obligation of cutting. Okay, we are at 10 lines in the bottom of the page. First word in the line is Rova. V'Amar Rova. Next one, 105a. V'Amar Rova. Rova says, it's another question. I am not fully familiar with the specifics here, so I'll try my best. What happened was you had a wall. You have a house with a wall in it, and in the wall there's a hole in the wall. There's a window. The tumah spreads throughout the house. Let's say, for argument's sake, this house has 2 doors, one on either side, right? And there's a door in between them, or let's say a window in between them. If the window is open, then the tumah spreads throughout the house. If the window is closed, then only half the house has tumah. So meaning you have 2 rooms, right? Yeah, imagine you have a house with just 2 rooms, and each room has a door and a window that connects them. And there's a dead body in
They have a door that connects them to each other, or
a window.
window.
A window that connects them to each other. And there's a dead body in one of them.
Right.
If the window's open, then the tumah spreads throughout the house. So what did he do? He stuffed a barrel into the window space, and it's a
barrel. It can't be a perfect fit.
So what did he do? So he put a smooth shmarim. He put he smeared like some sort of cement on it, sediment, to close off the window. So Gemara says he saves it. Meaning that the other side of the house, remember there's 2 sides, one has a dead body, the other side does not have tumah. Boy Rovo, Agav Chatzia Mahu. If he sealed off half of the hole, what's the story? Half the window was covered. So Amar Rav Yemer Rav Ashi, so Rav Yemer says to Rav Ashi, Lav Mishasenu he is, and not a Mishnah. The Tanan we learned, Chavis shenikva v'sasmu shmarm hetzilua. you put the barrel with the sediment into the window, so you seal up the window. The tumah does not spread. If he puts in a vine, he stuffs it up with a vine. So he has to put a lot of sediment to completely seal the window. Let's say he puts 2 vines. Until you smear the sides. So basically, in other words, the hole has to be completely filled. You have 2 vines, so the middle is sort of mostly filled. You fill the sides, and it's good. And between the vines as well. Okay, what is this? If it takes 2 vines to fill the hole, then what does it take to do it with 1 vine? Half the hole, right? And the Mishnah says still that Achi Marach, you still do the whole thing. Time of the Mirach, Holoi Mirach, Loi. Why, if filling half the hole with a vine requires you to fill the rest of it with sediment? Why isn't it like filling it with half the hole? Which was Rava's question. We should see from here that half the hole would spread tumah. Half the hole is filled. Tumah would still spread from one side of the house to the other side of the house. I'm reading. Gemara says Hachi Hashta. There's no comparison. Hasam in the scenario of the vine, Eli Marach like koi agav chatzim like koi agav chatzim midi koi. Okay, so he said there's a big distinction. The distinction is that with a vine, presumably it's not screwed in. Let's say it won't hold its position, so it's not even halfway covered because it's going to fall out. But if you put an agav chatzim, if you put a half cover, presumably that would last. So maybe it would suffice. And that was the question that Rava had. Okay, this question does not get resolved. It remains an open question. Second to last line of the page.
Called the guy who put his finger in the dye. Yep.
But Rava says, "Hari Amar goes al chametz for overall of Pesach. Amar loy harei shalach l'panecha." We've seen this already many times. He has chametz that has gone that he has kept over Pesach. Now it is forbidden. He's allowed to return it, and he can say to the guy, "Harei shalach l'panecha, this chametz is yours." Now, what about by Rava? Here's the question. Top of 105b. Nishba olav mahu. He makes an oath about the chametz. Mi amrin and kivin imigna boy shlumu lei mimaynek kafar lei adil mahash tamias hamonach va'afar ba'almahu v'lei kafar lei mimaynek. It's a very interesting question. So the guy makes an oath that he does not have the stolen chametz, and he actually does have the stolen chametz. Okay, so let's say as follows: if the chametz was burnt, how much does he have to repay the guy? The pre-Pesach purchase price. Right, it's a box of cereal, it's $3.79 a box. If it was, if however the chametz is extant, he can just return the box of cereal, which is worthless, going to the garbage.
What do you mean by extant?
If it's still around, it hasn't been eaten.
Oh, okay.
So hasn't been consumed.
About the stolen goods. Yeah.
So if the stolen goods are around, they're.
So the stolen goods are still in existence, and are we talking about the thief had it during Pesach, or
he had it over Pesach, and now he lied under oath about it. He still has it,
now he can
but he still has it,
and it's worthless to the original owner.
Correct. He's returning it returning the item as is.
And what's his penalty in all this?
He would get no penalty.
How is that? Come on. Give him a chance to repent. Let him around. Come on.
Return the item exactly as is, but there's a spiritual defilement of the item that's considered returning the item. Same thing.
You can't rough the guy up a little bit.
Maybe you could. Maybe you should. Okay. Okay. So now here's the question: is this considered making an oath on something that's worth money? in a certain sense, it is worth money, right? Because if you don't have it, you have to pay $3.79 for the box of cereal. But on the other hand, it's worthless because he does actually have a box of cereal, which is worthless. It's a good question. No? Fair question. So Gemara says, mostly the Rava Pshitla the Rabba. Rabba had a resolution. The Amar Rabba says, Shuri Ganafta, who am I like Ganafti? A guy says, you stole my ox. And he says, no, I didn't. He says, then he sees the guy having the ox. He says, why is the ox by you? So he says, I'm a watchman. Okay. So he makes an oath that he was a watchman. And then it turns out he was lying. He actually stole it. He gets a penalty for the false oath. Why? Now, in this case of this oath, if he's a robber, what does he have to do? He has to return it. If he's a watchman, what does he have to do? Also return it. He's also return it. So what's the difference? The guy says you stole it. He says, no, I didn't steal it. I'm a watchman. So he says, make an oath. He makes an oath. Turns out the witnesses come. He was a thief, not a watchman. What difference does it make? What did he swear about that was worth money? He said, I'm going to give it back to you. He swore that he was a watchman, not a thief. So he's going to give it back to him anyway. So what difference does it make whether he said he was a watchman or a thief? Why is there a penalty? You hear the question?
Yeah.
So the Gemara says very simple. The penalty is because the laws are different. If you're a watchman, you have complete liability. Whereas if you're a thief, you have complete liability. If anything happens to the animal, whether it's your fault or not, you own the animal and you have to pay cash. Whereas by a watchman, if it was stolen, an unpaid watchman, if let's say the animal was stolen while it was under his control, does not have to pay. So he does gain by arguing he's a watchman. And therefore, that is considered sufficient enough that if he makes a false oath, he has to pay additional payments, a fifth. It is considered a monetary difference because of the what if possibility that it might be stolen. Now you might think that same what if possibility applies to chametz and Pesach too, right? The guy lies about chametz and Pesach, even though technically the box of cereal is worthless, but because it could be worth something if it's stolen. The guy's going to have to pay money if it's burnt, if the box of cereal is burnt. So therefore, it is considered money, and you would have to make the oath would be valid, according to Rabbah. Let's continue. So Potter, he's exempt. Why? Potter, he's liable for the oath, paying a penalty for making a false oath. Sure, Potter because he intended on exempting himself from whether the item was lost or stolen. Shomer Sachar, let's say he's a Shomer Sachar, let's say he says I'm a paid watchman. Chayav, he's still liable for making a false oath. Because if the animal breaks a bone or dies suddenly, then either the renter or the paid watchman would be exempt. So there's still a benefit of being a paid watchman over a thief. Even if you're a borrower, shoyel on the olive, chayav, you're still liable for making a false oath. Why? Because what's the difference between a borrower and a thief? The only exemption for somebody who borrows an ox is if under the normal course of labor, the ox suddenly dies. If he's plowing the field, the ox drops dead, he's exempt. A thief would be liable. Thief does not have that exemption. So because there's these advantages, that's called money, and it's as if he lied about a monetary question. Even though the animal's still around, since if it's stolen, it would be a monetary question. It's called a monetary question. So even though the chametz is considered like earth, it's worthless. Since if it's stolen, he would have to pay money. So now too, he is he's denying a monetary question, and therefore he has to pay because he's denying a monetary question. He needs to he is liable for making a false oath. Okay, Yosef Rava. So Rava was discussing this question. He was discussing this, and Rav Amram was there. So Rav Amram the Rava. Rav Amram had the following question to Rava. The kicheshba means he lies about it. Okay. Prat l'mayda be'ikar. In the case of somebody lying about a stolen item, the kicheshba means he has to lie about it. This exempts him if he says a partial truth. Ketzad, how does this happen? The guy says to his friend, "Shuri ganafti, you stole my ox." And he says, "Loy ganafti, I did not steal it." Mativu etzlacha. So why is my ox in your garage? So he says to him, "Ata machartali, you sold it to me. Ata nasatli matana, you gave it to me as a gift. Avicha machruli, avicha nasnali matana. That your father gave it to me, sold it to me. Your father gave it to me as a gift." He saw his friend running after an ox. Acha parasi rots me elov. 1 second. I'm sorry. He saw him chasing after an ox. So the guy, he said, "Why are you chasing after it?" Presumably he was trying to steal it. So he says, "No, rots me elov. I was going for a run. Boetzli, it came over to me. I found it lost. Shemarchinamani, I'm a watchman. Shemersocharani, I'm a paid watchman. Shalani Olav, I'm a borrower. Okay, in all these scenarios, Vinishba v'hoida, he swears about it, and the whole thing is a lie. He's a thief. He's a thief. And he admits he's a thief. Yochli Yechayev, I would think he's liable. Talmud Leimer v'kichesh ba'prat l'moida be'ikar. This, okay, fundamentally, he's basically dismissing the past 5 minutes. Right? The past 5 minutes, we said, no, all these things are considered money. Because there's differences. Being a thief is different than being a watchman. And the same thing is true whether you borrow or you bought it or you found a lost animal that was wandering and lost. And now what we're saying is no. We're saying that and because in all these scenarios there's a grain of truth, and he's not completely denying it. So therefore, there is no. It's not called a denial. Denial is only when you say lo hayu dvarim me'olam. This never occurred. In these cases, he's saying, yeah, he's admitting it's the previous guys, but he says he sold it. So Amarlei Tedura. He says he told Rava says back to who is this? Rav Amram. He says you haven't really looked into this very well. Kitanya hahi the Amarlei helach. This Bryce is talking about a scenario of helach. We'll explain in a moment, but basically what happened was as follows. Helach basically means the guy says, "You sold it to me on condition that that we go on a trip together." Oh, the trip didn't happen. Okay, so here's the animal back, and he gives the guy the animal right away. In all those stories, and we'll explain all the details. However, all the scenarios of Rava before, when the guy says, "Why is my ox in your property?" He says, "Oh, I'm a watchman," and the animal, and he wasn't returning the animal that second. The animal at that moment was in the pasture. Okay, so let's explain. Okay, so let's go through all the scenarios. The first scenario is the guy Reuven says to Shimon, "What's my ox doing in your property? You're a thief." Shimon says, "No, I'm not a thief. You sold it to me." So, okay, well, 1 second. So what's the admission here? What's the halach? So Gemara says, we're talking about a scenario. So Reuven says to Shimon, "Why is my ox in your property?" He says, "You sold it." He says, "You're right. I never paid you for it. Okay, here, you can have it back." And he gives it to him back right away. Okay, same thing. Let's continue. Okay, so the same thing would be true if his father sold it to him, right? It would be the same response. Let's say he says, "Atanasatali, avicha nasnali." You gave it to me as a gift, or your father gave it to me as a gift. My ikka. Again, what's the admission here? So the Gemara says, it was on condition that I took your father for long walks. I'm sorry, I didn't get a chance to do it. Okay, you know what? Here's the animal back. Here's your animal. 1 second. He says, "I found your animal wandering." So the Gemara says, "Leima l'chai iboyle lahaduri." You should have given it back. So Amar Rav Shmuel, but I'm a shvu aveda mitzal sif v'lo yisi yadesh yishalach shaksi renolach. Okay, it was a scenario where he says, look, he said, I found the animal. I never knew who owned it. It's yours. Oh, sure. Here's the animal. He gives it back to him. So in all these scenarios, he's returning the animal immediately. So it's true he's making an oath, maybe to emphasize what he's saying, but the oath makes no difference here because he's not keeping the animal. He doesn't have the animal. The animal's returned already. So that's why in all these cases there is no denying. This is not considered a full denial. He's making up a story, but at the end of the day, the animal's returned. It was returned immediately, even before he made the oath. And that's why none of these oaths are valid. There's no penalty for lying about it. There's no financial penalty. Obviously, you're not allowed to lie. The guy has violated Torah law by lying, but there's no financial penalty because there was no financial consequence. The animal was returned immediately. In the previous scenarios, the guy says, "What's my animal? I'm a watchman. I'm going to give it back to you in a month." And it turns out he's a thief. Of course, in that scenario, he has to pay. There's the full penalties of lying under oath because there's financial consequences to what he says. We're together?
Yeah.
Short detour here. Tanya, Amr Ben Azai. Ben Azai says, Gimel Shavuos, there's three types of oaths with regard to lost objects. Hikr Ba V'Loi B'Maitza. Okay, so this is a guy who knows something about the lost objects. For example, he remembers the ox. This was a very unique ox. It was striped like a zebra, and he remembers seeing it.
It's a zebra.
A zebra ox, okay. V'loi b'maitza, but he doesn't remember who found it. Or b'maitza v'loi ba. He knows he remembers hearing in the bar that somebody was found a zebra ox, but he doesn't remember who it was. Or loi ba, loi ba v'loi b'maitza. He doesn't remember anything about the ox, and he doesn't remember anything about the finder. So the Gemara says in second, if he doesn't remember anything about the finder or about the ox, he doesn't know anything about what happened. So Kushta Kamar, he's saying the truth by saying that he doesn't know anything about the found item. So the Gemara says, Ema bav u'b'maitza. He knows both. He saw the ox and he saw the finder. Okay, so he makes any of these three types of oaths about a. So in other words, this guy knows something about the lost ox, but he doesn't. He lies about it. He says he doesn't know anything. What's the story? So what's the halacha if you lie under oath about knowing about a lost object but not giving the full truth? Rav Ami Amar of Chanina lifter. Rav Ami says the name of Chanina. Even though you lie about under oath, you're all exempt. Just because you lie about somebody else's lost object, it has nothing to do with you. You didn't steal. You're not a watchman. You have nothing to do with that. You're exempt. But Shmuel says you are liable for lying about it. Okay. Now, what's really the big advantage here? If he would testify about the lost ox, let's say specifically the scenarios where he knows the finder. So let's say Reuven saw Shimon's ox wandering around, and he knows that Zvulun found it. So if he knows that Zvulun found it, that's very powerful. What does that mean? That means that he can now go with Shimon to Zvulun and tell Shimon, I saw that you lost your ox. Now you have Shimon's ox, right? Reuven and Shimon demands the ox from Zvulun. Reuven says, I testify, so you have it. Now Zvulun needs to make an oath. A single witness, he make an oath. Right? So Zvulun could, if Zvulun refuses to make an oath, then he would have to pay back Shimon. Now, this obviously realizes 5 stages removed from Reuven. This is what we call a dover hagorim l'mamon. Reuven cannot actually make Zvulun pay. Reuven can make it difficult for Zvulun by testifying that Zvulun has to make it such that the result would be that Zvulun would have to make an oath. If Zvulun refuses to make an oath, then Zvulun would have to pay. So the question is, dover hagorim l'mamon, because he can cause Zvulun to have to pay. So is that considered money or not? And this is the famous question we've discussed in the past. The Tanya we learned, Hamashpia erechot potter. If somebody makes a single witness swear that he doesn't know testimony, and he actually does, we know that he knew about it. Potter is exempt because a single witness can't force somebody to pay. Only 2 witnesses can force somebody to pay. Rabbi Dovid Yehudah says he does have to pay. Why? Rabbi Dovid Yehudah says no, because the single witness could require the defendant to make an oath, and if he doesn't make an oath, he would have to pay. Therefore, he could indirectly have to make him pay. The single witness could indirectly cause the defendant to pay, and that's sufficient. That if he lies under oath about knowing testimony, we would make him pay.
What in this case was it the ox was returned?
No, so this is a standalone scenario. This is a scenario where the guy knows that somebody found a stolen item. It's a new scenario. It's a detour, total distraction. So this has nothing to do with the previous cases. We have an individual who walks down the street and he sees Zvulun finding this zebra ox, and he takes the ox home, and nobody suspects Reuven of any malfeasance. Question is about Zvulun. Okay. 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 Let's start. This one, I think. Yeah, let's start again. Amr of Sheshus, HaKofer b'Bikadin. Somebody who lies about an item that was in his domain. He was a watchman. He lies about the item. Nasa Olaf Gazlan. He becomes a thief. V'chayev b'Einsid, and he's liable for any type of damage. V'Tana Tuna, and have a brice that supports this. The Kichesh ba, he denies. Right. In other words, the watchman lies about lies about watching the animal. Okay. Lamadnu einish. Okay, let's just pause here for a second. Okay, whenever the Torah says something, we need to know what's called a azhara and an einish. Azhara is usually what we know about. The Torah typically talks about terms of azhara. Azhara is a warning. For example, loy sirtzach is an azhara. It's a warning. Don't kill.
Oh, okay.
Okay. We have the famous what we call the lav de chasima. Okay. Lav de chasima is don't plow an animal with muzzle. When you're plowing it, when you're working the animal in the field, you can't muzzle the animal. The next verse is basically the penalty of lashes.
Wow.
So and what we see from there is that there's two things there. So we have the warning, that's don't muzzle the animal,
Right.
and then we have the lashes, that's the penalty. Right? So we have a lav and an azhar. Okay. Now, in this case, the Torah says, and you lied about it, you get a penalty. Well, how do we know that you're not allowed to lie about it? Fair question? This is unusual. This Torah specifies consequences for bad action, but it doesn't say the action itself is prohibited. So the general law is ein einshin al imkein masirin. We'd have to, in order for the penalty to be given, we would have to find a source in the Torah that prohibits this type of behavior. In this case, it's actually very easy. It says haraminai, and where does Torah say not to lie, not to deny? So the Gemara says lo yitzchachashu. Don't deny the truth about an item in your possession. So there's a clear prohibition. My love, lo einish mammon. Presumably. Okay, so the point that Rav is making here is that lying about an item, you're liable even before you make an oath. So what happens, right? So Reuben's a watchman. He's watching Shimon's stuff, right? Shimon comes to Reuben. He says, "Where's my stuff?" And he says, "Oh, your stuff. Which stuff?" Right? I don't have any of your stuff. Sorry. Even before they go to court, Reuben's now liable for everything. Before Reuben makes an oath. Because presumably the law of denying is denying even without an oath. So in other words, there is sort of informal lying and formalized lying, right? I think in American law they call this perjury, right? Perjury is lying under oath. Then there are people that are just liars, right? Mm-hmm. So loisachachashu is to ma'alav einish mammon, meaning that loisachachashu refers to the penalty of the verse is for lying without an oath. So the Gemara says, no, lo einish shvua. The penalty is that for lying, you have to actually make an oath. We formalize, now you claim that you're exempt. Fine. So say so under oath. So the verse continues. 1 second. V'nishba al sheker, and he lied under oath. The The vikichesh, the denying, happened even without making the oath. So there's two separate things: it's lying and then lying under oath. The Tani say for Vinish Bal Sheker, Lamanu Oynish, as Horiminai. And how do we know, by the way? So Vinish Bal Sheker says he lied under oath. Now, how do we know you're not allowed to lie under oath? So the Torah says so, right? Lo Shakru, don't lie. Okay, as Horiminai and Tamlo is a Shakru. We just say for the Ishtava, Reish the Lo Ishtava. Because the end of the verse talks about lying under oath, obviously the first part is talking about where he did not make an oath. So Amri Idi the Ishtava. No, both scenarios are where he lied under oath. Okay. There's two possibilities for you to get the penalty. One possibility is where you admit yourself. The other possibility is where witnesses come and say you're a liar. Also, okay. So if witnesses come and say he's a liar, he doesn't admit of his own accord. So then he's liable for he has full responsibility for the item that he has in his possession. If he admits, so then it's interesting. So he gets a more significant penalty. He has to bring a sacrifice and he has to pay 20%. And the reason for this is because if he admits, we offer him the possibility of an atonement. Whereas if it took witnesses to force you to give back the item, then the atonement is not as easy. It's not as easy. Now we'll soon see that it really depends on what type of oath he made. If he said that the item was stolen and he's actually the thief, he has to pay kefil. He has to pay double payments. If on the other hand he says it was lost or disappeared some other way, then he would not. There would be no specific penalty. And tomorrow we'll get into real more difficult territory.
Right.
Okay.
It'll be later in the morning.
Okay. Yeah. Fine.
Yes,
Have a great day.
Oh, what lies ahead must be pretty brutal if you're willing to stop at
What
5
lies
years.
ahead?
Yeah. It's a